The Chinese professor ad, which sort of encapsulates the concepts of the Tea Party, is extremely interesting on a lot of domains. I mean, on the surface, the ad seems to be implying that America goes too far to the left, it becomes too socialist a state, and therefore it gets clobbered by the Chinese. And yet, when you look at the particular ad, okay, what do you see in the classroom but the most hardcore Chinese propaganda? Communist images you'll never see anywhere in China. Not only the flag, but images from the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, Mao. The ad presents a China that's radically communist, much more communist than it really is. A future China that is extremely hardcore communist, sitting around talking about how they took over the United States, how the United States now works for them, and the United States did it because of the collapse of its failure to be capitalist enough, which is very, very odd. And it contradicts. It's actually logically inconsistent. The ad, to the mind, to the thinking mind, makes no sense. It's logically a contradiction. It's saying that if we don't go back way right wing, we're going to get buried because we won't be able to compete with an extremely communist system. Okay, so that's a contradiction. It can't be right. So what is the ad saying? I think it works. The reason it works on two levels. One level is straight out basic racism. The ad really is playing on people's fear of being laughed at by Asians. Asians are the silly people, the inefficient people. They're the ones with poverty. They're the ones with hunger. They're the ones that say yes, sir. They're the ones that say yes, man. You know, they're the ones that hop. It's very much a post-colonial fears that the Asian is going to come back and emerge and laugh at you. Okay, you know, all the years we laughing at people, little jokes. Chinese people never swear. Also, we used to sing this as kids. People who grew up singing that are now afraid that they may not be able to compete. It was a similar fear of the Japanese 20 years ago. Now it's the Chinese. But I think there's even a deeper level to this, particularly with the Tea Party, in the fact that the winners are presented. What do we know about the Chinese from this room? We know that they've radically embraced the hardest core propaganda of their Maoist, Leninist state. Pictures of Mao, pictures of the Cultural Revolution, pictures of the communist flag are present. And what this is sort of the crypto-fascism, as you would call it, of conservative movement in the West, that from opposing the Soviet Union to the 80s to nowadays, that even though they may say this is the enemy, this is the other, but there's a constant unconscious process. You see this in Freud all the time, of us saying, you know, seeing that person who most embodies us, that reflection of us, is the one we despise the most. We don't like somebody because they remind us so much of what we want to be or who we want to be. And the thing is about this radicalized communist state that we see here, is that it's authoritarian, that it's controlled, that it's consistent, that it's driven by propaganda. And this is the very thing that I think the ad itself reveals, that the Tea Party wants at its heart, that the Tea Party members who see this, look at this, and they're like, the Chinese will win because they have this authoritarianness. They have this single race. Everyone in the room is the same race. They don't have racial diversity. You know, they're the exact same kind of Chinese. You know, there's no, you know, Tibetans or because there's different. There's Chinese with lighter skin, darker skin Chinese. There's Chinese from different parts of Asia. There's Tibetan Chinese. These Chinese all look, you know, they all look pretty much the same. They're all the same cousins. The desire, we are going to lose, because the wanting to embrace, the really wanting to have this system. And I think this was a lot of what was beyond the visceral anti-communism, is that we would look in the 80s, the Soviet Union, and they had a society where the rules were imposed. You didn't have to listen to ethnic minorities. You didn't have to worry about civil rights movements. You didn't have to worry about people taking you to court. business organizations in the Soviet Union didn't have to worry about being sued. There was power, there was authoritarian, there was discipline. And you see this time and time again in American television and movies where the star has to take on the Nazi uniform. He has to become the Nazi. Because actually deep down inside, for your very good authoritarian conservative American who's now joining the Tea Party, he feels he didn't really care that much about government spending or taxing. He didn't seem at all bothered when Bush was president. It didn't matter at all that there were wars being fought that were just being borrowed. Billions, hundreds of billions was borrowed to fight a war in Iraq. Nobody cared. But what they do care about is the fact that the society is becoming diversified, fragmented, and decentralized, and they have this view of a Mao, of the same image that communists are presented, of a united front of workers, of a kind of propaganda. And the real propaganda for this ad isn't as much what's being said, but it's the opening sequence. The Tea Party is trying, in its excessive use of imagery, of iconography, to create the kind of political structure that you'd have either in a fascist or a Marxist-Leninist state, where the whole world is represented not necessarily through complicated ideals. Very few communist propaganda really talked about Marxist theory, but through a very simple and clear iconography. Thank you.